If you're tired of hearing about how men are the problem, but hardly ever any solutions to fix the problem, then stick around to understand the roots of men's issues a bit better and to leave with some tangible ideas to start fixing them. This is part 2 of this episode, so make sure you check out part 1 to understand why society and its mainstream concept of masculinity really fail men, and then come back to learn how men can thrive and feel like men without losing parts of themselves to fit in a tight box.
Financial provision can absolutely bring safety to some people. Me working out, that actually in a weird roundabout way does fulfill a sense of safety inside of myself, because it's not because having muscles makes me feel safe. But I do feel that when I do work out consistently, I'm actually building safety within my own system, that I'm going to follow through on something that I say I'm going to do.
This one's for the boys, and about the boys, and the men. We hear a lot about how society favors men, but all the headlines about men's issues like high levels of loneliness, suicide, addiction, and violence highlight the fact that society has also failed men in many ways and for a long time. So today I'm speaking with Dr. Brandon from Remasculine and the This Triggers Me podcast. He's a sociologist and consultant specializing in the social, emotional development and well-being of boys and men. And he's going to help us understand how society fails boys and men and what we can do about it so that men and everyone around them can lead the best lives possible.
Let my breath brush your ears. Inhale these words. May they fill your lungs and the atmosphere.
This is an episode about men's well-being, and I think one symptom of men's lack of well-being is the fact that men cause the overwhelming majority of violence in the world of all kinds. We tend to focus on violence against women, but the majority of child abuse is also perpetrated by men on girls and boys, as well as violent acts in general towards men as well, and even towards themselves, as more men than women die by suicide, even though more women attempt suicide than men, but men tend to use more effective or violent methods than women. And since we know that people who commit acts of violence usually are people who were themselves victims of some kind of violence and have not had the opportunity to process that experience, it seems to me that this restrictive and rigid model of domination and suppressing one's emotions is detrimental to everyone, including to the men themselves, because it's a vicious cycle of being traumatized by someone who wanted to exert dominance and then exerting dominance on someone else to replay that learned pattern. And that third person might do the very same. So yeah, it's just a vicious cycle. And I know that not all violence in the world fits into that a specific pattern of trauma, but it does play a role. So is there any way that we can widen or reframe even some of the characteristics of the ideal manly men in a way that actually promotes emotionally healthy men? Before he answers, I really want to insist on the fact that there absolutely is more to violence than that, because if that were the only explanation, we would find that most sexual violence perpetrators are women, since they are the majority of sexual violence victims, including incest and even child-on-child sexual abuse. But no, men, who are the minority of sexual violence victims, become the majority of sexual violence perpetrators. So something else happens along the way. And I think it's fair to assume that it also has something to do with this pressure to be dominant that is so prevalent in the mainstream, rigid, and restrictive model of masculinity. So let's hear Brendan's answer.
Yeah, there's so much in there I would love to touch on. But to your question, yes, absolutely. The problem with a lot of conversations around masculinity right now is I think we've done a great job and a needed job of deconstructing the harmful aspects of masculinity, and we have not done nearly as well at building what positive things can be. And I think that's actually, from a developmental purpose, it's not great for boys' development to just hear ways of what not to do or what not to be, as opposed to hearing ways to be. And so I think that's a huge weakness.
Mm-hmm.
If you're curious, like I have I've been developing like a framework that I think I've been using with some boys and men, and it's had great feedback so far of like what a positive reframe could be instead of just hearing the
Absolutely.
messages.
Please.
Okay. And I would love to hear your honest thoughts to it as well.
Okay.
So things get problematic anytime it's a checkbox, because as soon as it's a checkbox, you're making it or you don't make it. And so my criteria, they all have to be ongoing processes, because that is what's really needed for well-being. It can't just be like either I've accomplished this thing as a man or a boy, or I have not accomplished it. That actually leads to what's referred to as discrepancy strain, when the ideal that you're trying to make up, you don't meet it. Anyways, I have so much more context behind these three things. But the three things that if I was raising a boy, or what I'm telling boys and men, if you want a positive masculinity to shoot for, would be build safety, show up, and give a damn. And build safety would be build safety within yourself and with others. It requires a high level of emotional intelligence to actually be responding to your environment and the people around that you care about, to know what building safety actually feels like. So if you have no one safe to be emotionally expressive with in the real world, which might be a real reality for you, it's can you be safe within yourself to show up for your own emotions, whether that's journaling or something else. But here you have like the most common things of like protector and provider. I think protector, physical protection, financial provision can absolutely bring safety to some people. And so that's an assessment of like, oh, actually, me working out, that actually in a weird roundabout way does fulfill a sense of safety inside of myself, because it's not because having muscles makes me feel safe. But I do feel that when I do work out consistently, I'm actually building safety within my own system, that I'm going to follow through on something that I say I'm going to do. And I had an interesting experience with my wife a couple years ago when she's like, Brendan, I don't care at all about if you work out or not, but I do care if you say you're going to work out and then don't, because that actually doesn't feel safe to me.
Yeah, that's trust.
Yeah, that's
It
the
builds
trust part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so like for me, I think protector and provider, like financial provision, absolutely. There's a lot of, for a heterosexual relationship, there's a lot of women that would really value economic stability from a partner. But it becomes problematic if you view that as like your one trick pony. So that's why it's like building safety requires a constant endeavor of understanding who you're interacting with and what actually builds safety for that person. Showing up, I don't think these are like male specific, but I do think that a lot of men connect to the idea that men follow through on the words. So if they're going to say they do something for their community, they show up for their community, they're dependable, but they also show up to face discomfort. They show up for accountability. They show up to face their own shame when it rises. And because one of the biggest hindrances to accountability, and I think a lot of people would feel a lot safer around a lot of boys and men and masculinity in general, if there was if there's greater accountability, sociologically speaking. And one of the biggest obstacles to that is inabilities to sit with shame as it comes up. So again, not weaponizing shame, but just noticing what is coming up in ourselves. And that is what I also would refer to as show up for the discomfort of that. And here you also need support for your community, because ideally, if you're showing up for other people are also showing up for you, and you're creating more of like a brotherhood. It doesn't have to be gender specific. And then the last one, give a damn. What essentially that means is care about something. So many teachers and parents that I work with, the hardest boys that they have difficulties with are the apathetic ones, more with the emotion of ennui or ennui. You're French. How do you pronounce it? Ennui?
Ennui.
Ennui.
Close enough.
Ennui. Okay. Thank you for that. So that kind of sense of apathy, of nothingness, that is almost harder for so many adults to associate, like to get boys like moving towards something. And there's also this sense in our culture of teenage culture of like, it's not that deep, bro, or like, don't take things so serious, but like you should take your own growth seriously. You should take your care for yourself and for others seriously as well. And I understand there's trauma-informed lens, would also understand that sometimes people who appear like they don't give a damn are just in a freeze response. And so I want to acknowledge that. So for me, like there's actually an order to those three things. Build safety first, show up, and give a damn. They're kind of all interconnected, but those would be my three things to like have positive messages, like aim for these three things. Are you showing up for people in your life? And are you building safety for yourself and others? And are you giving a damn about something? Are you familiar with Scott Galloway?
No.
Okay, he's...
Oh, yeah. Tell me. But I think so.
He's a business prof, and he's making the rounds on social media. He has a new book called Notes on Being a Man. I agree with a lot of what he says. I really have opposition or critiques of how he's packaging some of it. Like his three things are protect, provide, and procreate. He's wanting to have aspirational things, and he's expanding them. So going back to your question of like, he's taking some of like the traditional things, which are protect, provide, and I'd argue procreate has always been within there. Like have sexual prowess has been a very masculine thing for a very long time, and he's trying to expand it in more expansive ways of like, sometimes providing means getting out of the way so your wife or someone else can provide more if they're better at making money. So he's like moderate or modern about it. But I have a fundamental issue with the framing of those three things, because those are, again, just check boxes. Am I protecting? Am I providing? Am I procreating? And they're not no addressing of the emotional needs and support and the emotional pain that so many boys and men are in. Again, it can just become about check boxes and like outward accomplishments, as opposed to like inner processes that would actually lead to boys and men's well-being. What I love about what he's doing is, and I think he puts a lot of academics who are experts in this field to shame, is that he has recognized that there's no or hardly any positive messages around masculinity. And so he's trying to reframe some, and people are so hungry for positive messages around masculinity. And I think he's speaking to that pain point.
Well, that's great. You're doing that too. Going back to Brandon's framework of building safety, showing up, and giving a damn, I think it's helpful to frame masculinity as a set of processes instead of some boxes you should be able to check once and for all. Because our perception that anything is fixed or static is almost an optical illusion. In reality, everything in nature is always changing and adapting to external and internal factors, and that includes our physical and mental state. Nobody can maintain the same level of performance at all time without it becoming unhealthy. So if it is an ongoing process, it is much easier to stay accountable and ask yourself at any given moment, am I being aligned with my values? Am I fostering the conditions for me and everyone around me to have the freedom and safety that we all want and need? But that's so different from what men are usually incentivized towards. So I think we need new role models that embody that non-rigid, non-restrictive masculinity. And I can think of a couple. First, I Run John. So I Run John is a book by Robert Bly, and many men praise this book as a way of discovering themselves like they were never taught to, as a guide to become the wild man they are inside. In I Run John, the wild man is a healthy man who's connected to his essence, emotional depth, and wisdom, and whose strength comes from understanding his vulnerability, whereas the savage man is angry, aggressive, and destructive. And the author says that the wild man is the superior stage of manhood, and that men are taught things that prevent them from reaching that stage. And I guess author Sophie Strand might agree with him on that, as she uses her book about rewilding the masculine to argue that another wild male role model could be Dionysus. She was supposed to be on the show but couldn't make it in the end, so I'm just going to quote her on this. Dionysus is like his symbolic vine. He twines and entangles and embraces. He is a foliage of faces, a network of connections rather than one fixed monotheistic identity. How can we give this gift back to the masculine, the gift of mutability and natural transformation? Let us give back the masculine the ability to experiment with creative, spiritual, and sexual expression, knowing full well that this roots them as trees flexible in a strong wind, rather than brittle dead sticks stuck in sand. Now, this is the positive part of the conversation, the one we should be having way more, where we work on actual solutions. So I feel kind of bad for killing the mood, but since I started speaking about violence, I want to play you a snippet of my song Only Body, which should serve as a reminder of the historical sexual violence of, again, mostly men, against anything and anyone they deem weaker or dominatable, like women, other men, girls, and boys. And I know it might be hard to grasp, but it's not a few bad apples. It's the soil the tree grows in. All right, you can listen to the rest of the song at the end of the episode or on any music platform.
Your skin on my skin as I watch you sin. It's the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I cry within. Don't notice the thing, too focused on what you want me for. They told you that you could just take what isn't yours, and I pay the price, 'cause you're robbed me of the only body I had, 'cause you robbed me.
I saw a video on your Instagram where you mentioned a study that showed that men who have a more restrictive idea of what men should be report feeling the most sense of purpose in life. And the opposite was true for men who are less restrictive and thus healthier for themselves and others. And I'm sure I completely butchered that study, and feel free to correct me. But these results make it pretty tricky to imagine how we can attract boys and men outside of that restrictive box. Because as you mentioned in the video, actually, for the men in that box, leaving the box doesn't feel like freedom at all, but like renouncing a strong sense of purpose. So I'm asking you, do you have any idea on how to make it more fulfilling for men and boys to adopt less limiting values and roles? And before you answer that, I just want to tie this to something I heard Richard Reeves say, and it's the idea that men no longer know what their value is in modern society. I guess what they bring to the table, basically. So I don't even know if you agree with that, but how can we make it more fulfilling for men to adopt less restrictive roles and values? And what purpose can men have in the 21st century?
Two things I'll say. One is that one way to help men have more sense of purpose is giving them ways to be rather than just ways not to be. Like what we just talked about, positive messages, whether that's show up, give a damn, build safety. It's like you're seeing the purpose in these other things. And I do want to just represent that, yes, it's a statistically significant men more inside a rigid man box, which is demonstrably more harmful to them, but they have a greater sense of purpose. I think that does speak to how difficult this can be, because this is an existential issue. However, I also think that we shouldn't be. So yes, we should be giving a greater sense of purpose of what it's like outside of the cage. Absolutely. But also the people inside the cage also just need to be better prepared of like growth and change requires existential difficulties. It requires facing discomfort. There's, I really like the framework called the Wisdom Pattern by a Franciscan friar, I believe, Father Richard Rohr. And he just talks about how people and societies go through stages of order, disorder, and reorder. And acknowledging that in order to change and grow, generally speaking, there has to be these three stages. And reorder recognizes the necessary need of all of these stages. So order, the good thing about order is it offers a sense of safety and stability. It's like, oh, I know what I'm going to be. This is why so many boys and men, it's the minority of boys and men, but so many of them are attracted to like red-pilled, misogynistic, sexist content, is because one of the things they like the most is not the sexist part, but it's the sense of like, they offer me black and white guidance, clear guidance. They speak their minds about what to do, what not to do. It's just like the black and white guidance. Existentially, that is order, whereas disorder, there's a lot more gray. And so I would say third wave feminism really deconstructed masculinity into a state of disorder, which was needed, because order by itself can become tyrannical. So disorder is needed to break up the tyranny. It diversifies. But if you stay stuck in disorder for too long, it leads to anarchy and meaninglessness. And so then people are tempted to like go back to the order without realizing their own reorder here. And so what I have talked to the person who created that study, like what I would love for them to do is that my suspicion is that the men who have most left the man box, even though they statistically have a less sense of purpose in life, I do believe that's temporary. And I'd love to see follow up. And I'll use my own experience, for example, is that when I started my PhD research, I had a sense of masculinity that was like, oh, this is what it means to be a man. During my PhD research, I deconstructed that and I kind of thought, I've evolved past this. I'm just human. I've unlearned what it means. But then like 6 months after finishing my PhD, I just didn't feel settled within myself of like something feels off. Like I'm almost trying to fight something within my identity that feels like it really resonates. And so I'm much more mythopoetic than I might admit in some academic forums around what my own masculinity means to me. And so I've reconstructed something that I think is really expansive and is ongoing. But like I feel like I had to go through that disorder unlearning process and get to a place of reorder. And I know a lot of men have done that, but I don't think societally we haven't moved into a present state of where masculinity or what it means to be a boy or man has gotten to reorder. I think we're fighting about like disorder or we're fighting for order. And I would love to move to reorder.
In our conversation, Brendan mentioned some frustration with the tough love style of education.
This often happens with boys of like, I hate this, and I hear it so often, of the advice given to parents are like, you might lose your teenage son for a couple of years, but he'll come back to you eventually. So that's kind of like, figure it out your way. And then there's the snowplow parents who, it's called snowplow parenting because they're just plowing out every obstacle in front of their kid. And neither of those things actually results or creates the foundations of resiliency. And I think we all do want more resilient children. So sometimes, and I think a lot of men who are dads now grew up in a more tough love environment. And here's called the fallacy of misattribution, that people and men might assume that they became resilient because they were alone, but they didn't. They became resilient in spite of being alone. And that's a huge distinction. That being alone is more likely to make you not resilient to it, but it's your ability to actually be supported in difficulties is what leads to the most resiliency. And so like my favorite term would be sturdy parenting. And so sturdy parenting would be still having boundaries, but being supported along there. And so like you let your kid fall, but you're there to support them.
And because nobody should try to fix a systemic issue alone, I wanted to know what boys and men need in order to be healthier and how society and institutions can contribute to that.
I don't know which ones I'll name. They probably won't be the most important ones, but these are the ones that come to mind in this moment. I think we actually need to trust and have higher expectations for boys and men. So much research is around how important adults having high expectations are on student outcomes, student behaviors. And I think the bar that we have for boys and men in our society is quite low, and sometimes they go to the lowest common denominator. And so I actually think that we need to have more trust. And this can be misinterpreted, but I do think we have to have higher expectations on boys and men because we need a society with high expectations on human beings in general. Being optimistic about the best in people, calling that in, can absolutely, like I've seen some most profound changes in boys who have been like deemed just like problematic, like why are they even in school anymore, and having high expectations on them and letting them know of what not BSing my way into it, but like what do I actually see about them that I really value, and like calling that into light, into being, I think is really important. So that's the high expectations that I'm talking about. And I think that we need to get rid of the zero-sum game. And the zero-sum game is the idea that supporting boys and men comes at the cost of girls and women, comes at the cost of queer, gender expansive individuals. And so it's difficult because you have to balance two things. You have to balance like triage. Where is the pain the most here? And sometimes you can't divert all resources. You have to divert it based on the triage. But at the same time, if we're always just reacting to like more polarizations, especially online algorithms, and I think there's a huge onus on leaders in government, in companies to actually, like, if we want teenage boys to be able to stand up against the sexism of their peers, I'd be like, hey, actually, I'm not valued in this. We need like adults to actually step up in their positions of power to be like, we need to do what we can to step out. And there's so much more agentic steps individuals in companies can take that would support all of this, and just refusing to play the zero-sum game. Like, I'm 100% there's going to be tension between supporting boys and men and girls and women and gender expansive individuals. There'll be tension, but I'm so wanting, and I so see all of our healings interconnected, that like I want to work with people that disagree with me. And I sometimes get critiqued for being too critical to boys and men, and sometimes I get critiqued for being too compassionate to boys and men. And I want to listen to that feedback. But like ultimately, we're all on the same team.
Okay, so now to bring it back down to the individual level, when I think about tools for personal growth, specifically for men, I think about Stoicism and sports, which are very popular. Both are ancient practices that are absolutely valuable, so that's fine. But I was wondering if you could speak to the more negative ways in which they can be interpreted or misused, especially when it comes to boys and men's mental health. If you want to talk about that shortly.
Stoicism, I believe, has been misunderstood even in the time in which it was created. I read like Marcus Aurelius' life, where he was wrestling with the idea of like, people think that Stoicism is unfeeling. And at that time period, like, it was all about the passions, and you should have passions. And so there's been complexity around Stoicism in general. But what I actually love about Stoicism, and where I think it gets misapplied, is, again, I think most boys and men, I don't think many boys are really, well, actually, no, I do know some boys that haven't really looked into Stoicism. So I take that back. But I think that they use Stoicism interchangeably with, they actually mean emotional suppression. It means I'm not going to be bothered by anything. Whereas emotional Stoicism, the analogy I like, and I don't think I've created this, so I don't know who did, but like, imagine that your emotions are fish in a lake, and you yourself, you're the water. And so your goal is not to pretend that fish don't exist there. Your goal is like, oh, these fish are actually a part of my body of water. Like, they are a part of me. I want to notice what that fish is. So Stoicism actually has a ton of qualities of high emotional intelligence, being able to accurately name, understand what the emotion wants to do and where it came from. That's what Stoicism is about. But so many people think that Stoicism just means all you see on the surface is calmness, and it's just like, again, just emotional suppression. And that's not the case. I think the reason why I'm not like fully a Stoic, but this is also, there's different branches of Stoicism, but maybe I'm Stoic leaning, is that I don't think it's possible, and I don't think it's even good, to always just be like noticing the fish. Sometimes as humans, we are just going to be the fish. We are going to be angry. We're going to be blended as the fish. And so I feel like there can be kind of this emotional bypassing that happens of like, no, I'm not angry. And it's like, no, just let yourself be angry, like in a certain way. From just the emotional, researching emotions, we have to move through our emotions, and we don't move through them by conquering them. We move through them by knowing them, and getting to know them also means getting to know where they exist and feel inside of ourselves.
What do you think about sports? I mean, not sports in general, but do you think sports can lead to, can become harmful, at least like the culture of sports, especially for young men?
Long story short, absolutely. Like, anything could be a medicine or drug. Like, working out can be really helpful for have a lot of protective factors, and it can also lead to a lot of harm. And so the rise in like body dysmorphia, muscle dysmorphia, bigorexia, eating disorders, taking cycles.
What was that?
Bigorexia.
What's that?
Those are just other terms coined for like eating disorders around wanting bigger muscles.
Okay, never heard that. Okay.
Yeah, so there's all like even there's orthorexia,
Yeah,
which
I knew
is
this one. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So there's a rise in all of these things. But sports has such good protective factors, and it has risk factors depending on the culture. Boys actually tend to be more likely to break out of the emotional cage if they're athletes. Because boys who play sports can sometimes have more confidence because sports has given them confidence just generally of like knowing their bodies more sure of themselves. But also if they become more emotionally expressive, they won't get bullied as much because they're so respected and have social currency amongst their male peers. There can be great coaches, like great teams, great atmospheres. We talk about the hyper independence that teams can offer such a great support system. But really, it's the culture of the team that really matters too.
To conclude this conversation, I asked Brandon for some tips. What are some other effective things boys and men can do to be healthier?
It so depends on who I'm talking to. So just general tips, I would say like men sheds absolutely like community. Some of the most well-adjusted teenagers and adults, like they have 1 to 3 close friendships. In an ideal world, you have 1 to 3 people in your life that you can really open up a bit about. And so then here's my advice for if you have 1 to 3 close friendships, or if you have a group, is that so many boys and men, again, want emotional depth, but feel like no one else does. So I always say, like, go 10% more discomfort with vulnerability, and find one person in that group that you think you have the best chance of being a bit more emotional. Just ask like, hey, I love having fun together, hanging out. Would you ever want to have like deeper conversations more? Or another obstacle that I talk to so many boys and men about is that if they have something vulnerable to share, they often present it as a joke. In that way, if they laugh about it, then they pass it off like it is just a joke. And I think so many times guys' conversations go around that, not realizing that like actually there's a desire for a deeper connection. And so something that I have adopted, and a lot of boys and men actually really appreciate this, I adopted it from Ashanti Branch in the States. He just had like a number scale 1 to 10, and he has this rule like in a men's group and men's circles that he runs. You just say, what number are you at? And if you're a 7 or lower, you have to talk more about that. And you also give people permission that you're allowed to lie, because you know you don't have to talk deeper if you're an 8, 9, or 10, but just notice the number that's underneath. And giving permission to lie is actually like a really powerful thing, just because it's like, you might pull the wool over my eyes, but like you're not going to pull the wool over your own eyes. And I just want you to know what's the number underneath. Because like number 1 is like you're suicidal. Number 10 is like everything's going amazing in your life. But I've adapted this in my own friends, which is essentially when I hang out with my buddies, when we give each other hugs right away, we say what number we're at. And we know if it's a 7 or less, then by the time that we're done having fun and hanging out, we're going to have a conversation about something more emotional. And we also have a rule that if it's 4 or less, then we have that conversation right at the start of our hangout time together. And if it's a 1 or 2, then that means like we're calling or we're driving over to each other's house. So like having a system like that around numbers, I think can kind of like demystify and also kind of gamify what can be really awkward. Like I know I kind of was inspired by teenage boys in my own research who were the most emotionally expressive, but they still said it's kind of awkward to start these conversations. And so they play like games like Never Have I Ever. And they like, never have I ever felt suicidal. And then they have a conversation around suicide. Like that was their entry point to have more deeper conversations. So that's I guess a
already a
long-winded
great
piece
tip.
of advice. And then for again, I guess similar for parents is starting a ritual and a tradition around like at the table, you are sharing 1 to 10 and giving that permission to lie about the numbers, but you're also modeling one of my favorite terms that I heard from actually a client that I worked with was called emotional sportscasting. So adults, and individuals, if you start just broadcasting out loud, like, oh, I'm noticing that right now in this conversation with you, I feel pretty calm and relaxed. There's like a little level of insecurity that I often have when I speak, that I wish I was a bit more succinct and a bit more clear in my messages. But basically, I'm just live casting the different emotions going on inside myself. And so many adults have a stunted relationship with their emotions. And so I would just recommend adults talking to themselves about what's going on in their bodies with their emotions out loud. That actually can change where it lives in our brains and make us have more perspective around it. And so that is great, but that's also so great to model that in front of kids, especially boys growing up, in front of everyone, but modeling our own emotional intelligence, essentially, and getting able to name them. Journaling can also be a great strategy.
Okay, 3 main takeaways from this episode. 1. Give baby boys and young boys the same emotional attention and language you would girls, so they can learn to regulate their nervous system and not stay in survival mode when it no longer helps. And have high expectations for them. 2. We might never know whether what makes men men and women women is mostly biological, sociological, or spiritual, so let's focus on a better question, which is, does your belief on this drive you to create more safety and freedom for yourself and for everyone else? If the answer is no, there might be a conflict between your values and your beliefs, so maybe take a look at that. And 3, the idea that men should be hyper-independent, dominant, and unemotional is not the only way to find purpose, and is pretty ineffective for safety, happiness, health, and longevity. And it doesn't even match anything really, because humans are interdependent and emotional creatures. That's just a fact. So if you're in that restrictive box because you need the order of it, just open the door and maybe let yourself go on the journey of disorder and reorder. Try aiming for building safety for yourself and others, showing up for people, and giving a damn about something. And I say aiming because it's not a place you'll get to, it's a process you live in. And that way, you can find a version of order that feels good to you and the people around you. Now, movie time. I recommend the movie Close. This topic doesn't have to be as tragic as this movie, but I think it's a pretty good illustration of the pressure that boys face to fit in the tight box of rigid and restrictive masculinity. If you have more movie recommendations about this topic, please do leave a comment. You can find Brendan on Instagram at re.masculine, and before you go, stay for some extra information and to hear the rest of the song I played earlier. You know, the depressing one. I hope you got some valuable insights from this episode, and if you want to learn more from my guests, you'll find everything you need in the show notes. I, for one, thank you for your attention. I know you could have been watching or listening to a billion other things, and I'm glad you picked this one. Now, 3 things before I leave you. Number 1, if you liked the music you heard today, you should look me up on the music platform you use. There will also be a link in the show notes to help you find me on there. Number 2, if you want to help me make the internet a place for more constructive and nuanced conversations, you can subscribe, like the episode, share it, and leave a comment or review depending on where you're listening to this. And number 3, you can also subscribe to my free Patreon, to my free newsletter Night Sky, and follow me on Instagram or TikTok to understand a bit better the messages behind my songs. Again, everything will be in the show notes. All right, thank you, and take care, and keep trying to make sense.
This body is mine. I recognize it, it's mine. So how come I cannot make it move? These legs are fine. I can feel them, they're fine. So why can't I stand up and run? They told you that you could just take what isn't yours, and I pay the price, 'cause you're up made of the only body I had, 'cause you're up made of the only body I had. Your skin on my skin, as I watch you sin. It's the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I cry within. Don't notice the thing, to focus on what you want me for. They told you that you could just take what isn't yours.